Day 29 of the U.S.-Israel war with Iran, and over the next 10 or so minutes, we'll bring you our daily briefing with the key updates on the conflict. Now let's start with some of today's main developments that we can bring you from across the region and across the war. Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis enter the Gulf conflict, launching missiles at Israel for the first time since the war began. There have been no reports of casualties so far. Also, Iran has attacked a U.S. military base in Saudi Arabia, injuring at least 12 American soldiers, 2 of them seriously. Israel continues striking Iran with heavy bombardments reported in Tehran. Iran says a medical clinic in Minab was hit near the school where more than 100 children were killed on the first day of the war. Israel also says it has hit Iran's naval headquarters. In Lebanon, Israeli strikes have killed 3 journalists, including a prominent reporter for the official Hezbollah broadcaster Al-Manar TV. On the diplomacy side, there's still no confirmation of direct talks between the U.S. and Iran, but Pakistan confirmed it will host talks with Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey coming up on Monday. And Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has made more deals in the Gulf. First with the UAE, then with Qatar, as he continues to shore up military aid in exchange for Ukrainian expertise. Now, as the war enters its second month, a new combatant, as we've mentioned, has entered the conflict as well. In Yemen, the Iran-backed Houthis have launched missiles at Israel, creating fears that the war could be expanding. Despite being in a long-standing conflict with Israel and firing on ships in the Red Sea for years, this is the first time that the Houthis have entered the war. So who are the Houthis and what impact could they have on the conflict? Our Middle East correspondent James Waterhouse explains.
The Houthis are another Iran-backed military group, not to the same extent in terms of the depth of the relationship. It's not to the same extent as Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, but Iran has provided the Houthis with substantial financial and military support for a long time. So it's likely that when Tehran asked for help, it was always going to say yes. They've launched a missile at Israel today. They typically, in years gone by, don't cause the Israeli air defences too many problems, but it's how things could escalate which could have far wider implications. Because the Houthis in the past, with Israel's war with Hamas, for example, they have targeted commercial vessels in the Red Sea, which is connected to the Suez Canal. When you consider the blocking of another major waterway, that would have huge implications for global markets. So that is a factor that Israel is having to consider. But Israel is also fighting this war on an increasing number of fronts. It's deepening its ground offensive in Lebanon. It's raiding an increasing number of villages there. And this is only adding to the dynamics of this ever-expanding war.
Meanwhile, in Lebanon, another Iranian-backed group, Hezbollah, has been fighting with Israel since the early stages of this war. In recent days, Israel has ramped up its attacks to the point where the United Nations has said that, quote, nowhere in the country is safe for civilians. Today, 3 Lebanese journalists have been killed in a targeted Israeli strike on their media car in southern Lebanon. Here's our correspondent Lina Sinjab with the latest in Beirut.
This is really a terrible war for the Lebanese. I mean, today as well, in addition to the journalists, there were 7 paramedics that have been killed, making the total number of paramedics killed in this war to 50. And over the past 3 weeks, we've seen that Israel has been using, double tap tactics. So when they strike somewhere, the paramedics rush to the scene to help, and then they're hit. They are paying price for helping and rescuing others. The death toll have reached over 1,100 people, including 120 children. And we should remind our audience as well that this 3 weeks war have forced over 1,200,000 civilians out of their homes. Most of them ran away from the south of Lebanon, where Israel has expanded its ground operation, taking control of over 10% of Lebanese territory and pushing hundreds of thousands of civilians out. But the UN also says that there are 150,000 civilians trapped in the south of Lebanon, cannot leave and probably don't want to leave. But Israel have bombed all means of transport. They've destroyed 5 bridges. They are attacking fuel station. People describe Israel's actions there as an effort to depopulate the area so that they control it. And the worry for many Lebanese who've been at war with Israel for decades is that they're living a deja vu scenario where there is an occupation for the south, which in 2006 war, Israel was forced out of Lebanon, and 20 years later, they are going back and taking control of the south.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has continued his push to shore up military alliances with key allies in the Gulf region. He's now made agreements with Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia to provide Ukrainian anti-drone and missile expertise in exchange for military aid. Our correspondent Katie Watson has more from Doha.
We don't have the fine detail, but we do know it's about working together. Ukraine sees itself as an expert in countering, in anti-drone defences. It wants to work with the Gulf and share its experience, its expertise. At the same time, the Gulf has deep pockets and has expensive missiles that it could also, that Ukraine could take advantage of in its war against Russia. So it seems like the perfect partnership, and hence why there's been this kind of very quick tour around the region by President Zelensky.
There is hope that there could be talks between Iran and the U.S. in the coming days, but nothing has been confirmed yet. Diplomatic efforts do continue. Pakistan will host talks with Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey on Monday. Caroline Davies sent this update from Islamabad.
While there is still no confirmation that there will be talks between Iran and the US, Pakistan has announced different talks that will be happening from tomorrow, Sunday, here in Islamabad, the capital. They will be the foreign ministries of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Turkey, and the discussion will of course be about de-escalation in the Middle East. Now, this will be again seen as Pakistan positioning itself as a key mediator between the US and Iran. Now, we already know that Pakistan has been passing messages between those two countries, but we also know that Pakistan's foreign ministry has been talking about the number of phone calls that Pakistan has been having with its senior officials and senior officials in other countries, not least a conversation that was had between President Donald Trump and Asim Munir, Field Marshal Asim Munir, who's the head of the armed services here in Pakistan, just under a week ago. The big question, of course, with these discussions is, will any of these 4 countries be able to put something on the table, be able to find a way through for de-escalation at such a fraught moment?
Caroline Davies there in Islamabad. So no direct talks yet between the U.S. and Iran. We are now a month into a conflict that has changed the face of the Middle East and has made a huge impact on global trade as well. So let's speak to our correspondent Joe Inwood in London for more on that. Joe, very good to see you. How can we quantify just how much this war, how the impact that this war has had now a month into it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard in some ways because there's a lot we don't know about exactly what's happened on the ground in Iran. According to the US and Israel, they've done massive damage to the military infrastructure there. But then every day we're still seeing these pictures, we're seeing attacks come out, missiles launched out of Iran. And I think the really important thing here is that a month in, after this huge offensive by the Americans and the Israelis, Iran is still firing back. And the reason this matters is because this in some ways is to do with time. Time is really important here because every day that passes, the attacks that the Americans and the Israelis can carry out, their effectiveness essentially decreases marginally over time. So each day, what they can do is a bit less effective than the day before on average because the targets are being kind of destroyed. But for the Iranians, it goes the other way. Every day that passes, their tactic, and that is disrupting the global economy, damaging the economies of the Gulf states, every day that passes, their strategy becomes slightly more effective. And I think that's really the important thing to understand if we're going to understand this conflict, and why many people see that the Americans, or say the Americans, have got themselves into something of a strategic dilemma that they don't really have a solution to. Because what they've done is they've put the Iranians in a situation where they feel it's existential for them, and they know that every day that passes, as their hand strengthens slightly. Now, of course, the Americans dispute this. They would do. They every day talk about how they have devastated the Iranians. But actually, I think a lot of people are looking at this and are saying that the strategic advantage is now starting to be with the Iranians. And that's really quite significant.
Time, indeed, Joe, has been an important pressure point on President Trump here in the U.S. With more U.S. troops arriving in the region, no direct talks taking place, what does happen next?
Yeah, I mean, if I knew the answer to that question, I think I'd be rather surprised, because there are so many options for what could happen next. I mean, the point you mentioned there about troops, that is an important one, really is, because if the Americans decided to commit troops, there's talk of them trying to take Karg Island, this really important kind of oil and gas terminal off the coast of Iran. That would be a huge escalation, a huge step up, because then American boots get on the ground. They are within striking distance of Iranian short-range missiles. I mean, really, who knows what could happen there? But I think it would not be a positive outcome for the stability of the region. Of course, the hope that you get is that there will be some sort of negotiated solution, some sort of diplomacy breaking out here. But the problem is that when you see the demands of both sides, that they are fundamentally at odds. What the Iranians are calling for is, for example, I mean, amongst a number of things, permanent recognition of their sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. They want reparations. They want the Americans out of the region. The Americans' list of demands is essentially demanding total surrender from the Iranians. And so you have this situation where neither side really concedes or sees themselves as losing this war. Their conditions for settling it are at complete odds with each other. So despite all the talk of diplomacy, it's really hard to see what that path would be, what that route to peace is that brings the two sides together, because at the moment neither are giving an indication that they want to compromise, or that they're seeing this as seeing this conflict winding down.
As Joe was saying there, Donald Trump has been claiming that talks have been going well with Iran, with the Iranians. Tehran has been far less optimistic, first denying that talks were taking place, then rejecting the U.S.'s 15-point plan to end the war. So let's talk about the Iranian perspective with my colleague Khashar Jonaidi. He's the Washington correspondent for BBC Persian. Thank you so much for being with us. How can we assess where the Iranians stand on these initial points of a peace plan that have been passed via Pakistan to Iran?
Well, first of all, let's not forget, Iran has no trust to the Americans when it comes to talks about peace and ceasefire. They were in the midst of 2 rounds of talks. Each time, in the middle of the diplomatic negotiations, the Americans attacked. Well, the first time, Israelis attacked first. So they don't trust the Americans on this issue. And when the 15-point peace proposal by President Trump was talked about on different outlets and media, the Iranians rejected that. The Iranian government is saying, if there's going to be peace, if there's going to be ceasefire, it's going to be on our terms. And they have mentioned points such as Iran wants all U.S. bases out of the region. They want to change the regime at the Strait of Hormuz, and they are saying that we want to impose tolls on ships passing from the Hormuz Strait. They want to receive guarantees that the Americans won't attack them again, and they're saying that no limits should be considered on our ballistic missile program. These points have already been considered as the Americans as a no-brainer. And it's totally opposite to what the Americans are demanding. The Americans, what they're asking for is a total surrender from the Iranian side. Parts of those 15 points were already discussed and rejected by Iran in previous rounds of talks.
We have seen the Iranians, of course, say, and they have noted that they have been able to put an incredible amount of economic pressure on the global community. At the same time, we know that the Iranian military, the Navy, the Air Force, really have been decimated by those U.S. and Israeli strikes. So what position do you see Iran in these possible talks coming up?
Iran may feel it has an upper hand in the Persian Gulf, in the Strait of Hormuz, trying to pressure the choking point of international economy and oil prices, energy prices. And it's not only about oil, it's also about other stuff, fertilizers, for instance, and it's going to impact world food security in the next year. But let's not forget that much more than this has been, much more loss has been imposed on Iran itself, not only on the military, but also on the infrastructure. Yesterday, 3 steel plants in Iran were bombarded. These are steel plants which are an important part of the Iranian economy. And people's lives have been devastated. In the past month, many people have not been able to make money. Many people have left their cities, their hometowns, to go to safer areas. So people's lives have been put on hold. And after a month, many people are feeling the toll of this war. They're exhausted. There's a lot of psychological pressure on the civilian population. The constant bombardments every night in Tehran and other major cities has put a lot of pressure on people's psychological health. And there's a lot of pressure on the Iranian government as well. So the Iranian government is trying to retaliate, but when it comes to economic loss, Iran has lost, Iran's losses are much bigger.
Okay, Kasha Janedi, Washington correspondent for BBC Persian. Thank you so much. Now, whether you are joining us on YouTube, TikTok, Sounds, radio, or TV, thank you for your time. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the Iran War Today.